So, what have I done?
Michelle, shh.
I'm going to have to take off the background.
Okay. We about to start this evening's program. What was done here? I switched off my thing. We'll start off asking everybody to give tzedakah. We'll do Torah to fill a tzedakah. If everybody will join me, please, in saying Tehillim. We'll do Kapitel Tes Vav. With everybody together, please, or repeat after me. Mizmor David, Adonai, Miyagab Ba'alecha, Miyishkoin, Baha Kodshecha, Holech Tomim, Ophel Sedek, Bedover Emes, Bilbavai, Loi Ragal, Al Lashonai, Loi Osar, Lerehu Ra'a, Bechepa, Loi Nasa, Al Kurovai, Nivze Be'enov, Nimas, Ves Yirei, Adonai, Yechabed, Nishba, Lahora, Veloy Yomir, Kasboy, Lanosan, Beneshech, Beshoichad, Al Noki, Lo Lokach, Oyster Eile, Lo Yimai, Lo Olam. Welcome everybody to this lecture series, which has been sponsored by the Herschel Wise Center, and it's been done Le'eloi, Nishmas, Adrian Siffer, Avram Yaakov, Ben Pinchas Zelig. May he be a good intercessor on our behalf, and his neshama should have an Eloi, an Aliyah, in merit of the Torah Tzedakah. Without further ado, I'm going to invite Rabbi Taub. Just a reminder for next week, he's speaking on parent-child relationships, and the subtitle is All the Things We Wanted to Tell Our Parents, but We're Scared to. So parents, especially parents of children or teenagers especially, join in, zoom in, listen in next week, pass the word around. Last lecture was unbelievable. We got a very, very clear messages how to deal with anxiety and thoughts that bother us. And we'll leave Rabbi Taub to get on to tonight's talk. Safe soul spirituality during COVID.
If you just wait 1 minute, I'm just still sending the Zoom details to someone. Just one.
Are we recording, please, Yossi? Yeah, it's recording. Okay, Rabbi. Okay, we're ready for you.
Ready for me?
Yeah.
All right. Good to be back. Okay. How do I make that noise go away? Now I got it. Okay. So last time, which was not last week, it was 2 weeks ago, but we spoke a lot about anxiety in general and the fear that we produce in our mind. Not fear that actually is a helpful survival mechanism for dealing with stuff that's happening in front of our face, but the stuff that we meditate ourselves into, meaning negative meditations that we get ourselves worked up about. And as I mentioned to you last time, that actually I was going to use a lot of that for this time. But because we read from the Hayemim that spoke about, remember that? The daily lesson from that day about averting your mind. So since it mentioned averting your mind, I actually took some stuff I planned to say this week and I said it at that class. So now what I want to do is go back a little bit and fill in some of the stuff that I didn't say then that I'm going to say now, but also I want to keep it with the title, which Everyone saw the title? Yeah, something about the COVID reality and the stress, the strain, dealing with the quarantine and COVID and all that stuff with tranquility. So we're gonna make it fit into that title. And plus, also, another thing I want to do is, since next week's about parenting, and I think the week after that is about marriage, I want to start to lay some of the groundwork for that. I don't know if we have the exact same people coming every week, but if you do come next week and the week after that, some of the stuff I want to talk about today will help you a lot with the stuff we're going to talk about next week and the week after. Okay, so just to recap everything I said, today I want to tell you a bunch of stuff that I didn't say last time, but I'm going to say this time. It's going to tie into the title, the theme about dealing with Corona. And it's going to set the groundwork a little bit for some of the stuff we're going to talk about next week and the week after when we talk about family relationships. Okay? Fine. All right. So let's start like this. I don't know what the numbers are, and I don't know if there are numbers yet. Surely studies will be done in the future, and I'm sure many people will write their doctoral thesis on the subject. I'm sure it will be studied by many experts in the times to come. And that is what? The effect that the past 3 months had on families. In late March already, meaning early on in the whole, lockdown, quarantine, I already started hearing, I mean, anecdotally, of course, these are not studies. These are, not numbers that necessarily, it's not peer reviewed, but anecdotally, I started already hearing in late March that calls to domestic violence hotlines were skyrocketing. I can tell you also, anecdotally, my experience, things that I've been aware of, dealing with, hearing from people, that there is a lot of tension in a lot of people's homes. And a lot of discord in family relationships. At the same exact time, I want to tell you also that I've been, again, anecdotally, but I've been aware of some amazing stories of really great deepening of relationships between husbands and wives and fathers and sons and mothers and sons and fathers and daughters and mothers and daughters. And so the question is, how come for some people it's heaven and some people it's hell? Because that seems to be, and obviously, I don't want to, exaggerate or oversimplify. I'm sure that there are many people for whom it's a little bit of both, or it's somewhere in between. But there's definitely a lot of stories for whom the lockdown life, the quarantine life has been absolute living hell. And then there are other people who are saying, I love this. This is fantastic. They're letting me telecommute. I don't have the strain of going into the office. I'm spending time with my children because I'm not, commuting after work. I don't come home exhausted. We're having family dinner together. I mean, these are the things you're hearing from some people. My wife and I take a walk in the middle of the day. It's amazing, right? And then there are other people who are saying, I'm crawling out of my skin. I can't wait to get out of here. And So I'll tell you a parable, a well-known parable. And you might have heard it from other sources, but I want you to know that it's a Jewish parable. And it's a parable from a famous Maggid, a preacher, named the Maggid from Ramshishok. Ramshishok was a town in Lithuania. And they used to have guys who would go from town to town, and they would give speeches. That's how they made a living. And this Maggid from Ramshishok, when he would come to a town, one of the speeches he would often give is about Achdus, about unity. Why did he give that speech? Well, I mean, I could guess. It's usually a popular topic, and it's usually a very needed topic, because what town couldn't stand to hear a lecture about Achdus, about unity? So this Maggid of Ramshishak, he used to give this a lecture about unity. And the way he would always start his lecture is with his parable. He'd get up and he'd say, it's great to be in Manchester, right? Or wherever it was. Great to be in Cleveland. You know where I was just before this? You know where I'm coming from? I was just in London or whatever, you know. You know how speakers, when they tell you, you know, I just flew in from New York and boy, are my arms tired, right? That's how comedians and speakers and rabbis, how they always, you know, they begin by talking about, yeah, I was just traveling. Okay. So he would do the same shtick. He would say, yeah, I was just traveling, except what he would do is he would say like this, I just came to your town, but my last engagement, I'll tell you where I was in hell. That's how he would start. I was just coming from hell. Yeah. He said, hell's an interesting place. I went to hell, and the first thing I saw when I went to hell, really, really caught me off guard, is there was these long banquet tables. And they were beautifully set up with platters of food, sumptuous banquet, and looked really, really nice. And I'm trying to figure out, how is this hell? I mean, they told me it's hell, but how is it hell when everything looks so nice over here? Big banquet, big tables, big platters, lots of food. So I looked a little bit closer, and I saw something interesting. I saw that the people were frustrated. They were not happy. Why were they frustrated? Well, I got a little closer and I saw that they had spoons tied to the ends of their, you know, like they had a spoon here, okay? And then they had a slat on their arm like this to keep the arm straight, so they couldn't bend the elbow, right? Just had to keep their elbow straight. So they have their elbow straight, and at the end of their hand, they've got the spoon tied to the end of their hand, right? Like that. And they'd have all this food in front of them, and they would go take the food. They take the food, they get the food on the spoon, but they couldn't bring it to their mouth. So they were very, very upset. They were very frustrated. And that's why I understood that it was hell. That was their punishment. They were being tantalized. They were being tempted and tortured with this delicious food that none of them could eat because they couldn't bring the spoon to their mouth. All right, so after that, I decided, all right, so now I'm going to go, I'm going to check out heaven. So I went to heaven, to Gan Eden, and I saw what's going on over there. And I got to tell you something, I was surprised because when I walked in, the first thing I saw, it was very, very much like hell. It was the same setup. They had banquet tables, and everything was, very nice, it looked very nice setup. Everyone is seated along the tables. They had platters of food. So that looked exactly like hell. But then I got a little closer and I saw that the people don't look upset. They look happy. So I wanted to see, what's the difference over there? Maybe they don't have, maybe their arms aren't tied up. Like, that's probably what it is. And I got closer and then I realized, no. Look, at the end of everybody's hand, they had a spoon tied to the end of their hand. They had the same slats on their elbows so they couldn't bend. And it's the same setup that they could, scoop up the food. They couldn't bend it to their mouth. They were stuck just like the people in hell. But they looked happy. So I was trying to figure out why they're happy. And I got closer and I saw somebody said to the person across from him, he said, "My friend, I'm hungry. Can you get me some of that, some of those peas and mashed potatoes?" I don't know. I'm trying to be. If it were me, it would be peanut butter jelly sandwiches because I'm an American. But I'm trying to be culturally correct over here. Peas and mashed potatoes, right? Okay, that's what it is. Peas. Yeah, you guys like to eat peas, right? Okay. Anyways, is that like? All right. So, my friend, can I have some peas? And then the guy across from me would be like, "Oh, of course, my friend." And he would scoop up the peas. He couldn't bring it to his own mouth, right? But he would scoop up the peas, and then he would feed his friend. He would lean forward, and he would feed his friend. And they were all happy. They were all fed. So the Maggid of Ram Shishak, he would give this speech, and he would say that story. And he would say, "So now I realized that the difference between heaven and hell is just the people. Same setup, same situation. It's just the people." And then he would give a whole talk about achdus, about unity, and about bringing peace to the town. In other words, whether a situation, a town, a home, an office, or whatever, a place is just a place. The place isn't what makes it heaven or hell. The circumstances are not what makes it heaven or hell. It's about how the people treat each other. When the people treat each other with love and compassion, then it's heaven. When the people are self-absorbed, then it's hell. So I was thinking basically the same type of thing about, the stress that a lot of people are having right now, being at home. It's not about home, is it? It's not whether or not home is a stressful place. It's about the relationships in the home. I mean, I guess that's an obvious statement. But what can we do from our side to make the home a little bit more heavenly? In other words, what can we do to make the relationships with the people under the same roof as us a little bit better? So I want to go back to the parable. I think it's a very rich parable. And I want to look at a detail there. People are sitting at a table. They're sitting across from each other. In hell, they don't help the person sitting across from them. In heaven, they help the person sitting across from them. A good relationship begins with seeing the person who's sitting across the table from you, noticing that they're there, becoming aware of them and their needs. What do I mean by that? Who doesn't see the person sitting across from them? Who doesn't see the person sitting across from them? Let me ask you a question. We're on Zoom right now. How many people right now are only doing this and not doing anything else right now? Okay, there are 82 people here right now, including me. I'm only doing this because I'm talking. I don't want to slip up, so I have to fully focus. But if you're just listening to me, how many people are doing something else at the same time they're doing this? Okay, don't worry, I'm not offended. Don't worry, I can't. Thank God, I can't see anybody. But what I was saying is, when there's a person sitting across the table from you, and you're doing other things, and I'm not saying only technology. You know, they make technology into the devil, as if it's because a person has a phone, they're not present. I remember in the old days, people used to sit and read the newspaper in your face. They'd sit across the face from you. I remember I had a job interview, and a guy sat and read the newspaper while he pretended to interview me. It was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So, I mean, technology certainly, plays a role, but ignoring the person across from you didn't start when they invented technology. Okay? The point is, you could be sitting across the table from someone and not see them and not be present for them. Why? Because you're doing something else. So hell is a place where they don't see the person across the table from them. Heaven is a place where they do see the person across the table from them. You say, how do I not see the person across the table from me? Okay, you see them. What does that mean, you see them? It means you don't bump into them. I mean, you're aware that they're there, but you see them. Really see them. You know what it means to see somebody? To be tuned in. We all know how it feels when somebody sees us. It's one of the greatest, most powerful experiences, most electrifying experiences is when somebody's totally focused on you and non-judgmentally present. You know, people talk about having one-on-one audiences with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Last week was Gimel Tammuz, the third day of the Hebrew month of Tammuz, which is the Yortzeit of Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh Livracha. And people who had one-on-one audiences with the Rebbe always talk about the fact that the Rebbe was so busy, he had the whole world on his shoulders, running so many different operations, and being so deeply immersed in Torah scholarship. And there's so much on his mind, and so many people who turn to him. And people always talk about, the people who were lucky enough to have one-on-one audiences with the Rebbe. They always speak about how they felt when they were in the personal audience with the Rebbe, they felt like they were the only person in the whole world, because the Rebbe was totally focused on them. And there was a secretary who would come and, knock on the door and pull you out after a while. But, when you were there with the Rebbe was totally there for you. And, you could say, well, that's a tzaddik, that's a very holy person who can be like that. But I think we should try to be like that to whatever extent possible. To whatever extent possible. Imagine if we could give that to our children, that level of presence, of focus. How our children would feel about life if they felt that when they were sitting across the table from us, we really saw them. Or our spouse. Imagine our relationship with our spouse, where our spouse really felt that when we're sitting across the table from them, that we're totally there, totally tuned in, non-judgmentally aware. It's like I said, it's an electrifying experience, and it's an extremely attractive experience. And everybody wants it. Everyone wants to be seen. Everyone wants to be known. Everyone wants to have someone care who they are. It's a basic human need. And when people when they don't feel it at home, sometimes it makes them very vulnerable to seek it out in other ways that aren't necessarily so good. Like if our children aren't getting validation from us, who are they getting it from? And what kind of values do those people have who are validating them? And is it necessarily values we want our child to have, right? So it's really all about seeing the person across the table, completely seeing them, being there for them. Being there for them means being there for them, to see what they need, right? Like in the parable of the Maggid of Ram Shishak, seeing across the table from you a hungry person who wants to be fed and feeding them. Loving someone the way they want to be loved, being tuned into what their desires are, and being able to provide it for them. Sometimes your kid wants to talk to you about, my teacher's being mean to you. Well, there are many reasons, my teacher's being mean to me. My kid comes home, my teacher's being mean to me. Okay, there are many reasons why a kid would have that conversation. Sometimes we jump and we assume, oh, because he wants me to fix it. Okay, I'll offer a solution. Well, maybe that's not why, most of the time people tell you about problems, they don't want a solution. But we jump to fix it. Well, that's not what he's asking for. He's asking, for just to be heard. Usually it's just to be heard. But, my point is, seeing the person across from you means being tuned into what they need, what they're really asking you for. So if they're not asking you for a solution to their problem, don't solve their problem when that's not what they were asking for. Or sometimes we give people advice, right? Well, you know what you ought to do, right? And that could feel very, very judging. Like, I'm telling you about my problem. I just want to be heard. I want to be validated. And you tell it, well, you know what your problem is. You know what you're doing wrong. Whoa, all of a sudden I'm getting the opposite of support. I'm getting judged. Okay. My point is, seeing the person across from you means being aware there's a human being, a flesh and blood, sitting across from you. They have their own needs, their own desires, their own hopes, their own dreams. Sit there and be there for them. Be aware of what they want, and connect to them the way they want to be connected to. And when we do that, then the home becomes a heavenly place. A heavenly place. And it's a place where everyone wants to be. Everyone wants to be in that place. Look, everyone wants to be in the place where they're seen, where they're known. How many people go hang out in a pub every day? Because when they walk through the door, people say hi and they call them by name. Right? People that have their pub and they go and what are they doing there? What are they accomplishing? Well, what's the purpose of it? They don't go home. They go to the pub, right? Because when they walk in the door, they get acknowledged. And they tell the bartender, give me the usual, right? And the bartender knows what their usual drink is. And they know me. They care about me. These are the people who care about me. Everyone wants to be in the place where people see you. And everyone's calmer when they feel like they're in the place where people see you. Now, if a person comes home, the guy comes from the pub and walks home, and he walks through the door. Now he's leaving the place where people see him and know him and acknowledge him. He's entering the place where he doesn't feel seen or acknowledged or heard or known or understood, right? So there's tension right away, and the tension begets more tension. There's an old joke. It's just a joke, so don't get too nervous about it. But this woman went to a rabbi and said that she and her husband argue terribly. Every day when he comes home, immediately they start arguing. And so he tells her, well, there's a Kabbalistic cure for this. She says, what is it? He says, well, you have to go down to a stream at midnight, the night of the full moon. And in the light of the full moon at midnight, you have to gather the water from the stream in a glass bottle. It has to be glass. And you take it home. And you have to leave that glass bottle with the water from the stream that was gathered at midnight under the full moon. You have to leave that glass bottle on the shelf. And then when your husband walks in the door, just as you hear him walking through the door, you go take that water and you pour it in a glass and you make a bracha shehakol and you drink the water, but you don't swallow it. And you have to hold the water in your mouth for 10 minutes before you swallow it. And this is the Kabbalistic cure for your problem. So she goes and she goes, waits until the full moon, and she goes at midnight down to the stream. She has to bring like a lantern because it's dark, it's the middle of the night. She gathers the water in the glass jar. She comes home and she puts it on the shelf, and she waits till the next day. She hears her husband coming in. She goes, gets the bottle, she pours it in the glass. Shakal Nia B'Devodah, she makes the blessing. She drinks the water. She doesn't swallow, she holds it in her mouth. Husband walks in the door, and he looks at her, and he says, "Is dinner ready?" And she says, mm, mm, mm. And he says, "Where are the kids? What are the kids doing right now?" She says, Why does the house look like a mess? She's not answering. So finally, he just sits down, calms down, sees that she's not taking the bait, sits there quietly for a while. After about 10 minutes, she swallows the water. And he's like, "So let me tell you about my day." "Oh, okay, fine. Tell me about your day." Kabbalistic cure. He was coming in. He was being a jerk, definitely. Trying to, coming in, talking negative. And what would happen before? She would respond. "Well, what did you do all day, Or, whatever. He'd bicker with her. She'd bicker back. And what was the Kabbalistic cure? Just not responding, not feeding into it, right? Amazing. Kabbalistic cure. What's the point of the joke? Every joke has a little truth, and every truth has a little joke. That just by not responding, things got better. It diffused the situation. Just by not feeding into the negativity, by getting baited, not taking the bait. When you don't take the bait, things automatically get smoother. She didn't even say anything any better or nicer or smarter than she used to. Just not answering. So my point is that immediately we can take the edge off. We can lower the tension level in the home, even without saying or doing anything special. Just by being quiet, we can immediately take the tension level in the home down by sitting across from a person and not even talking, just being there. And it just takes the tension down. It relieves, everyone relaxes. They start to relax a little bit. And it's a virtuous circle. It's a positive feedback loop. It just gets better and better and better and better. Because the more relaxed people are, because they feel like there's space for them, they feel like people are giving them space, people are granting them their basic human dignity, acknowledging them, so then everyone relaxes. Then when people are relaxed, so then they're more open and they're more vulnerable, and then there's more connection. And then when there's connection, people are more relaxed. And then when they're more relaxed, so then they're more open. And then when there's more openness, there's more connection. And when there's more connection, people are more relaxed. And when people are more relaxed, then they're more open. And you see, it just gets better and better and better and better. But it all begins with seeing the person sitting across the table from you. And whether or not we truly see the person across the table from us is the difference between heaven and hell. It's interesting. We're coming up unfortunately, in about a week to Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th day of Tammuz, which is the day when the Babylonians broke through the wall of Jerusalem. And then that led 3 weeks later to the destruction of the temple. But the story really began much earlier in the year. It began back in the winter time, on the 10th day of Tavis, like January time. roughly equivalent. Like 6 months ago, 7 months ago. What happened? That's when there was the siege. The siege, you know what a siege is? That a siege, militarily speaking, is when one army surrounds another army or populace and cuts them off so they can't get in or out. And on the 10th day of Tavis, which is a fast day, it's a day of national mourning. It has been for over 2,000 years, close to 3,000 years. There's the mourning of the destruction of the first temple. As first and second temple, we mourn on that day because of the siege. What does it say? It says in the book of Yechezkel, in Ezekiel, Samach Melech Bavel El Yerushalayim, which literally means, in this context, the king of Babylonia, Nebuchadnezzar, leaned upon the city, which means the siege. The thing is, that word, Samach Melech Bavel, he leaned upon the city. Normally, that word means support. Like in Tehillim and Psalms, Seimech Hashem l'chol hanoiflim. Hashem supports all who fall. So, really, if you didn't know the specific interpretation of that verse, if you just read the words and translated, it would seem to mean the king of Babylonia supported the city. In context, it means he besieged the city. But the words literally mean he supported the city, which is funny because that's the opposite meaning. He supported the city? No, he besieged the city, which led to the downfall of the city and the destruction of the city. So how do you explain a word that means that really the opposite is being used in this context that way? So there's a Hasidic explanation that really the siege potentially could have been a support to Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem, and everyone there. And we see this from an earlier siege of the city, which Sancheriv, who was the king of Ashur, the Assyrian king, he laid siege to the city during the times of Chizkiyahu Melech, the king Hezekiah. And what happened when the king of Assyria besieged Jerusalem is that the king told everyone to do teshuvah, to repent, and to return to God. And it worked. And the city was miraculously saved. And it was a heyday of the Jewish people. It was a great time of peace and prosperity, at least for a little while. So it actually, from the siege of the Assyrian king, it became a real 180 turn. Everything really turned around, became extremely positive for a while. And here too, when the Babylonian king came and he laid siege to the city, people could have taken that as a cause to repent and to re-strengthen their commitment in their relationship with Hashem and to each other, and it could have been a beautiful thing. In fact, the siege itself could have actually facilitated a wonderful period of time. A wonderful period of time. Because what is a siege? A siege means that no foreigner can get in and no one who lives in the city can get out. It's like lockdown. It's like quarantine. It's like, finally, I don't have to commute to my job. Finally, my kids don't have to go to school. Finally, we all have the time. We were always saying, well, we'll spend time together when we have time. Now we have time. It's beautiful. No distractions. You can't even have extended family, the cousins or the relatives or the in-laws. No, it's just the nuclear family under one roof. Imagine that. Just mother and father and children all stuck in one place. So that's what it was like. Could have been a beautiful thing. Jerusalem on lockdown, and the Jewish people together with no distractions, no outside influences, just the ability to focus on each other and to really build their bonds and to unite and become strongly unified would have been beautiful. The siege itself could have been a beautiful thing. Should have been a beautiful thing. And that's why it says, Samach Melech Bavel, the king supported the city, because in potential it would have been a support. Instead, it ended up being a negative thing, and it was the beginning of the end. It was an event that led to an event, which led to an event, which eventually made the temple get destroyed. But it didn't have to go that direction. One situation can be heaven or hell. One and the same situation. That situation of the siege of Jerusalem could have been heaven. Could have been a beautiful time. Jews united in Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, you know what Jerusalem is? Jerusalem is Yira Shalem, complete awe of heaven. So imagine all the Jewish people united together in their common awe of their Father in heaven. Beautiful situation. At least in potential. Could have been. Could have been. So like I said at the beginning, in the future, many studies will be done, I am sure. And people will write doctoral theses and people will write books and about this period of time. And I don't know what they'll come up with and what they'll conclude, and I actually don't even care. What I am more interested in is what our children are going to say when they look back on this time. I'll just be personal for a second. Yesterday, we finally lost our heaven that we had. We had to give up one of our kids. We had a heaven for 3 months since before Pesach. The whole family was home. All the kids were home. The kids who are usually away studying out of town were all home. It was heaven for 3 months. And yesterday, my son went away to be a counselor in camp. They reopened his camp. We have in the United States, different states have different rules. So his camp is in a state where they're having summer camp. So yesterday we brought him to Brooklyn, and he took the bus today to Michigan, and he's going for a summer in camp. And we were so sad. I mean, we're proud of him. We're happy for him. He's going to be a counselor, and he'll do a great job. But for 3 months, we had the whole family together under one roof, and it was heaven. I make my living going around and speaking. So just personally, since you're listening, if you want to be the person sitting across from me and focusing on me and letting me be present or being present for me. So this is a good therapy. I appreciate this. My living the past 3 months, we're talking about my parnasa, my livelihood. In Yiddish, we say in dred. It's in the ground. Because I make my living traveling around and speaking. All that got cut off the past 3 months. I'm not making any money. I mean, a little Zoom here and there. But it's nothing like, okay, whatever. You can talk to my booking agent. You'll find out what I get paid. Anyways, my point is, it was beautiful. I haven't been making money, but it's beautiful. It's heaven. It's heaven. And at the same time, I'm very, very, very aware of the fact that for some people it's not heaven, and for some people it's even hell. But we have to begin with the premise that the situation itself is not the problem. The situation itself is the solution. Just like the Jews in Jerusalem. Hashem was makdim refuah lamakeh. Hashem sent the cure before the disease. The temple was ultimately destroyed because of baseless hatred between the Jewish people, among the Jewish people. And that was the disease, baseless hatred. The cure was already sent to them beforehand. The cure was they were all locked into Jerusalem together without anyone coming in or anyone going out. So the disease was baseless hatred. The cure came before that, which was the opportunity to reunite with each other, to bond. Now, they didn't take it that way. They didn't take it as that opportunity. And so what happened, happened, and we all know how it ended. And we're in exile. But it could have been heaven, and it could have been something wonderful. And it all has to do with how people treat each other. Heaven and hell are not two different places. They're just the way people treat each other. And treating each other begins with seeing the person across the table from you. I'll tell you one more thing about this. This is a little bit technical, but I'm sure everybody can handle it. There's something in biblical law called tsaras, which is often translated as leprosy. It's not leprosy. It's not a contagious thing. It's a physical malady. It can very often, one of the symptoms is it causes a certain skin condition, but it comes from, well, the main cause for it was speaking lashon hara, speaking slander, and it doesn't happen anymore, but in the times of the temple it would happen, and people would get this disease called tsaras, and the rehabilitation of the Mitzayra, the one who has tsaras, was that he had to be quarantined. He had to sit outside of the camp by himself, and nobody could come near him, not even the other people who were banished. And the reason that his rehabilitation was to be banished was midah keneged midah, measure for measure. That he caused rifts, cracks in relationships through speaking slander. So measure for measure, his punishment, or his rehabilitation is better to say rehabilitation than punishment. His rehabilitation was to experience isolation. So really, tsaras is a disease of isolation, broken relationships. Now, there's an impurity that comes from that disease. And in fact, somebody who has that disease is so impure that if he is in a house, he defiles the house just by being in the house. There's a case in the Mishnah that discusses if somebody like this, with this condition, comes into someone else's house, does he defile their house? And the answer is, not if they kick him out. If they tell him to leave, then it doesn't defile their house. But if they welcome him in and they say, okay, come on in, then it does defile the house. Then the question becomes, well, how long do they have to kick him out? Do they have to give him tea first? Or, do they have to kick him out right away? And the Mishnah says they have the amount of time it takes to light a candle. And commentaries on the Mishnah actually say a Shabbos candle. So you with me here? You following this? There's this guy with this weird condition that causes impurity. He walks into somebody else's house, and they have to tell him, the owners have to tell him, get out of the house, or the impurity is going to spread to their house. How much time do they have from the time he walks in to the time that they tell him to leave? The amount of time it takes to light a Shabbos candle. There are a lot of ways of quantifying a duration of time. Why is lighting a Shabbos candle the expression that's used? You hear what I'm saying? It says they have the amount of time it takes to light a Shabbos candle to tell this person to leave before the impurity spreads to the house. Why does it say the amount of time it takes to light a Shabbos candle? Especially because lighting Shabbos candles is something that happens for a minute once a week. It's not a common thing that's going on in a house. You should have used some activity that goes on all the time in a house. So I'll tell you a beautiful explanation that I heard. And that is, what is this impurity of tsaras? Like we said, it's a disease of isolation. So the impurity of tsaras taking hold in a home really means that the spirit of isolation, a spirit of broken relationships, overtakes the home. But what banishes that negative energy? Lighting a Shabbos candle. If you can light a Shabbos candle, then you can banish the spirit of isolation from the home. Because lighting candles, we're told, is to bring peace to the home. What does it mean to bring peace? A very, very, very simple level is that in the olden days, they didn't have lights burning all night. So if you didn't light a Shabbos candle, you didn't have any light at all, and people would bump into each other. That is going to cause a lack of peace. But on a deeper level, even today when we have lights on all night, the Shabbos candle brings peace because it's a spiritual light. And what is light? When you turn on lights, it allows you to see. And when you can see, you don't see anything that wasn't already there. It was already there, but you were in the dark, so you didn't see it. When you turn on the light of the Shabbos candle, you see the other people in your home. You don't see anything that wasn't already there. They were already there. All the people were there, but we didn't see them. We light the Shabbos candles, suddenly we see each other. What do I mean we see each other? Again, it doesn't mean physically see. We see each other. We don't bump into each other, pass each other in the hall. We don't bump into each other. But I mean to see, to really see. That feeling of being seen where you feel that somebody's totally present for you, totally tuned into you, tuned into connecting to you the way you want to be connected to. When we light the Shabbos candles, we create a spirit in the home that facilitates real bonding, real connection. I'll tell you a quick story about this. There was a guy, well, I should back up before I tell you about this guy. The situation is there was this crazy rich family that made some wedding on a private island. And so they flew all the guests to this private island to have their wedding. And the rabbi got there and he was about to officiate, and he realized that nobody there was Shabbos observant. Why is that relevant? Because in Jewish law, in order to act as a witness, legal act of the marriage, so the person has to be Shabbos observant. It's just the way that the halacha, the way it is, the way it is. And nobody was, except for himself. Now, he could be one witness, but you need two witnesses. So he didn't know what to do. He's an Orthodox rabbi. He's bound by Jewish law. There's no wiggling out of it. Nothing you can do about it. And the people who asked him to come, they knew he's Orthodox. They asked him because they wanted an Orthodox rabbi. So he says to the parents, he says, I don't know what to tell you, but I don't know how to ceremony because we need another witness and we don't have anyone who's Sabbath observant. And we're on a private island. It's not like we can go just, it's not like in Manchester. If you need a 10th guy for a minyan outside on the road, and you wait till somebody walks by and you bring him in. This is not a private island somewhere in the Caribbean. So I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. My hands. So the best man overhears. Now this is where I started before. There was a guy. Okay, here's the guy. The best man, friend of the group. He overhears the whole thing. And he comes in and he says, what's the problem? He says, I need another Sabbath observant Jew, but we don't have any here on this island. So he says, I'll do it. He says, you'll do what? He says, I'll become Sabbath observant. He's like, no, you're not. He's like, yeah, I will. You're not going to become Sabbath observant. He says, let me ask you a question. If I make a decision right now to be Sabbath observant, does that make it okay? Can I be a witness? The rabbi had to think about it for a second. Hold on a second. You're making a resolution right now on Tuesday afternoon that you're going to be Sabbath observant this coming Sabbath. You thought about it though. Yeah, of course it does. Of course it works. You don't have to actually have had yet a Shabbos. The minute you make the commitment, it works. He says, but you're not going to make that commitment. He says, no, I'm ready to. Did you ever keep Shabbos before? He says, no. Well, do you even know what it entails? He's like, yeah, you can't answer the phone. He's like, it's a lot more than that. He says, well, I'm ready to whatever it is. That'll be my gift to the bride and groom. So now the rabbi hears, he says, this is the gift to the bride and groom. Okay, maybe he means it. He says, can I tell you a little bit about Shabbos? Okay, tell me. So he starts to tell Shabbos, and the guy says, good, I'll do it. So the rabbi says, listen, there's a lot more than just that, and you're going to have to go study and find out what it is. But if you want to commit, but I want you to spend an hour. I want you to think for an hour. And look, we're not going anywhere. Everyone's on a private island. It's not like I can go back to the mainland and bring somebody back with me in an hour. Okay, let's wait an hour and let's see. In the meantime, everyone will keep eating hors d'oeuvres and sipping champagne. We'll stall them for an hour. So the guy thinks for an hour, comes back to the rabbi, says, Rabbi, I thought for an hour. I'm going to be Sabbath observant. So he says, fine, let's do the wedding. So they do the wedding. About 10 years later, the rabbi is walking down the street in Miami Beach, where he is a rabbi. He still is a rabbi there. I know the rabbi. It happened to. I actually heard the story directly from him. He's walking down the street in Miami Beach, and some guy runs over to him, Rabbi. And, rabbis have a lot of people come over to them and say hi, and they don't know who they are. But, you smile and you pretend to know them, and you hope they'll say something that'll remind you who they are. But he's not remembering who this guy is. The guy is talking to him like they know each other. Finally says, I'm sorry, I got to admit, I don't remember who you are. He says, Rabbi, remember 10 years ago that wedding on the private island? He's like, oh, yeah. He's like, that was me. I was the guy. I was the best man. He's like, wow. And then there's an awkward silence. And the guy says to the rabbi, he says, Rabbi, I know what you're thinking. You're embarrassed to ask me, but you want to know, am I still Sabbath observant? He says, yeah, that's what I want to know. He says, you could ask. He says, are you still Sabbath observant? He says, yes. He says, in fact, I want you to know something. All of my friends, and this guy, he was a rich guy. I mean, everyone there at this wedding, at this private island, they were all very rich, powerful people. All my friends are very rich, very, very powerful people. They're all divorced or they're all miserable. Either they're not married anymore or they're still married, but they're not happily married. He says, I'm the only person from my peer group who has a great relationship with my family. And I'll tell you the reason what I think it is, because it's the only thing that I do different than everybody else, is we have Shabbos. It means that no matter what I'm doing, no matter where I am, at some point in the week, I know it's going to come Friday afternoon. And everything has to stop. And my wife lights the candles, and we have a meal together, and we're together for 26 hours with each other, no distractions. And he says, Shabbos saved my family, saved my life, because I see what everyone else in my peer group has, and I would be just like them if not for that. We have the ability to light Shabbos candles, figuratively and literally. I would add literally as well. If you're not lighting Shabbos candles, you can begin doing so. If you already do so, always an ability to do a mitzvah with greater zeal and greater love and care, and to enhance that mitzvah. But also, figuratively, lighting Shabbos candles figuratively. It's turning on the light, spiritual light, that allows us to see what was already in the room. Like I said before, when you turn on the lights, everything that was in the room before is what's in the room now. It's not like something new appears in the room because you turned on the light, but now you see it. When you turn on the spiritual lights and you realize there are other human beings who have hopes and dreams and feelings, and you see them, actually see them, it's a whole different experience, and it can be the difference between heaven and hell. Then you're going to say, well, let them do it first. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes we got to do it first. Like the joke about the lady with the bottle of moonlight water, right? Her husband didn't do anything differently. It was totally one-sided. And she didn't even do anything. She just didn't do something. She didn't respond to his taunts, and things got better. Things can get better. Especially if we make a decision to see people, to really see them, hear them, listen to them. What do they want? What do they hope for? How do they want to be seen? When you give that to people, they don't want to be anywhere else. They don't want anywhere else. They want to be in the place where they are seen and understood. And when they feel that, everybody calms down. Everyone calms down. The home becomes a safer place. It becomes a place where you can breathe. It becomes your safe haven. There are people who need to get out of the house in order to be able to breathe. And then there are people who need to get home in order to be able to breathe. Ideally, we should be able to breathe everywhere, in the house, out of the house. But if you had to pick where the place that gives you added relief is, I think we should all agree, at least for the benefit of our children, that it would be preferable, the place where we can feel relief and comfort shouldn't be by leaving home, it should be by coming home. So that's the idea for today. Start to see the people across the table from you. Start to really see them. And the situation, even a situation that felt like a negative situation, will become a positive situation, because it wasn't the situation, never was the situation. It was about the relationships of the people in the situation. I have some questions in the chat, which I'll deal with now. And anyone else who wants to send in questions, please feel free. I have a little bit of time here. I'm happy to questions. I remember last week or 2 weeks ago, the last session, we had many, many, many questions. And I'll deal with those questions right now. You could put them publicly. I think it's better to send them privately. You see how everybody how to here. See there. You see. I say RST. I think that's what I put in. So you see where it says that. If you click on my name, if you click on everyone, it'll go to everyone. But if you click on my name, then you'll be able to send me a private chat, and I'll take your questions here. Okay, so let me start with some that came in already. How could there be heaven in the home when one has a medically ill child locked in at home during lockdown, which which made the child situation even worse, which has an immediate effect on the home? That's a really, really challenging question, because One of the hardest things to deal with is when a child is going through a difficult time, when a child is in pain, when a child, that's the hardest thing. A parent would rather have any type of problem themselves and not have to see their child going through a problem. It is very, very, but I'll ask you a different question. How can there be heaven in the home when this child needs when the child needs help, medical help that they're not getting because of lockdown? So first of all, let me say that to my knowledge that there is support, that Rabbi Jaffe has programs, or can put you in touch with those who provide these programs, and you should definitely reach out and see what help they have to offer. That's the first thing. Then I would ask you, some people ask, well, how can your home be heaven with a sick child, even if your child has access to the medical care that they need right now? But, your child's sick, so your home must be a very gloomy place, and everybody must really be strained, and it's probably terrible for your marriage, and all the other siblings probably feel neglected. And now, certainly that happens. There are cases like that, but is that a fair assumption to make? That just there's a child in a family with medical issues, now I can assume that all the relationships in that home are broken. That would not be a fair assumption. It would not be a correct assumption. To the contrary, there are many families where they have such challenges, and there's an incredible spirit of unity and support in that home. Well, I was saying that, is if a child has access to the medical care they need right now. Well, now let's exacerbate the situation and say, because of lockdown, they don't have access. That's a very serious challenge, and I'm not minimizing the challenge, but what I'm saying is, does that automatically mean that the relationships at home are going to be strained? Does it automatically mean that people are going to be on edge? Or does it mean the opposite? Perhaps in this situation, there can be greater compassion and greater patience, because here you have a child who has a serious issue and a serious challenge, and therefore everyone in the home is even more compassionate, more patient, more bonded with each other. Another thing is, it's not simple. It's not simple to deal with these challenges. However, we all know there are families that have no serious problems or serious challenges, and they don't get along. And then there are plenty of families who have really serious challenges, really serious problems, and they get along wonderfully. So getting along doesn't make that the child suddenly doesn't have their medical issue or they have the treatment that they need. No. But it totally determines how that situation will be experienced. I promise you, if you ask the other siblings 10 years from now, what was growing up in your home like, nobody grows up and says that I didn't like growing up in my home because I had a sibling who had medical issues. They grow up and say, I didn't like growing up in my home because I had a sibling with medical issues, and therefore my parents were always stressed and in a bad mood, and they didn't have a good relationship with each other, and they neglected all of us. You hear that all the time. But you know what you also hear? You hear from people, I grew up in a home where there was a child with challenges, and our family was so bonded and took such care of each other and was such a team. It's wonderful. Obviously, it's not wonderful that there's a child who's sick, right? It's not wonderful when there's someone in pain. That's not wonderful. But the way the family handles it is wonderful. And ultimately, that's what makes the situation a heaven situation or not. Okay, I'm looking. There's another question here in the chat, but it seems to be actually, now I'm looking at it. It seems they're asking for a private response. Okay. I'm not sure how to provide that. You can email. Yeah, you can email. I'm not promising a prompt response. You could always email to, here, I'll put it in, rabbi@soulwords.org. You can email. I will say that I do not get back promptly to emails. I get way more emails a day than I can keep up with. And that's why I do things like what I'm doing right now, these kinds of conferences, because this way I can speak to many people at one time. So this is really an opportunity to discuss what you want to discuss. As far as one-on-one, there are very few opportunities for that. That's just the reality. Yeah, and you could send your question if you need to write it up a little bit more, and we could address it at a future talk. We have 2 more talks, especially on the topic. I mean, even if it's not, I could probably figure out a way of working it in. But if it's on the topic of next week, we're going to talk about parents and children, and the week after that about marriage. But yeah, if you have questions that you want to discuss on these Zooms, you could send it in. Or if we get a bunch of questions or totally off topic, maybe we'll do another session. We'll schedule another talk just to deal with the questions that came in, right? Okay, fine. So you can do that. Somebody's asking here about the home. What if there's no space and people are on top of each other? Yeah. It's interesting. There's a Gemara that says, in the Talmud, it says about marriage, that there was a guy who said that when my wife and I got married, we could comfortably fit. Actually, what it says in the Talmud is we could lie next to each other on a bed the width of the edge of a sword. He said, but after we were married for a while and we got into some fights, then even a bed of 60 amos, that's 90 feet. Sorry, I don't know metric. But in American units, like 90 feet. That's like a basketball court. Basketball court is 96 feet. 60 amos is like a basketball court. Even a bed the size of a basketball court would not be enough size for us. In other words, it's not about the amount of space we have, it's about the relationship. Or like another Gemara tells us, another passage from the Talmud, Ava dechekes es habasar, that love literally pushes back the flesh. makes more space. You literally have more physical space when there's love. So, sometimes you can't put in an addition and build on a room, but you can create more space in your heart when there's more love and there's more compassion and tolerance. Then automatically it feels like there's more space. Okay, what else? Here's a question. What are you meant to do when your husband most of the time out and I'm home with a bunch of little ones and doing activities that they like baking challah or Play-Doh? Don't get the dough mixed with the challah, by the way. Crafts, etc. But one kid is always not happy and saying that they're bored, even while doing things or even when a friend is over. Okay, so you're talking about different things here. Maybe they're related, but there's two different things here. One is that your husband's out most of the time. I don't know if you're saying that's a problem or not. Well, maybe that's sometimes it's not a problem, but you mentioned it. You mentioned that. Maybe the point was just that you're alone, and therefore you're shorthanded because you're a staff of one, and you have one child who's not stimulated by the activities that you're doing for the other kids. But at the same time, you're saying that child is bored even when they have a friend over, and even when doing things. So at first I was thinking, well, maybe this child just needs more one-on-one attention because they don't like the same activities that the other children are doing. But then when you said they're bored even when they are doing activities and even when they have a friend over, they're still bored. Okay, so then it sounds like you're talking about a child who is always bored. There are a lot of different reasons for that. Why a child is always bored. I mean, sometimes it has to do with issues with what they call attention deficit. But something you could discuss with a professional. I'll talk about it just on a very simple level, on a human level. That what do you do for somebody who doesn't eat? They don't like food, or whatever they, picky eater, fussy eater, whatever they don't like it. This isn't good. No, I don't like this. No, I don't like this. Whatever you serve, no, I don't like this. Okay, so some people are like that with not about eating, but they're about with activities. No, this doesn't do it for me. This doesn't do it for me. No, I don't like this. No, it doesn't do it for me. So what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do for that? What's the problem? Generally, well, let's see generally, but in many cases, a lot of the problem is that we turn it into a challenge. That okay, well, let me find a food that you will like. Maybe I just have to accept the fact that this kid doesn't really like most foods. Okay, so they don't like eating. Okay, eventually they got to eat. No child ever starved to death while they had food within reach. I'm serving him food. He doesn't like most food. Okay, well, I try to serve food. I wouldn't purposely serve something that I know he doesn't like, but I gave him options. And the same thing with a child who says they're bored. Okay, so they're bored. Okay. See, I think as parents, sometimes we hear that and we're like, oh no, my child's bored. And like we have to fix that somehow. It's not necessarily something that needs to be fixed. Sometimes children complain, I'm bored. Okay. So they're bored. That's okay. We don't have to, just like a child who has food to eat, but they don't want to eat. Okay, so don't eat. When you want to eat, you'll eat. I gave you food. So to a child who says they're bored, okay, so they're bored. That itself is not really an issue. Now, what can become an issue? You didn't mention this in your question, but what can become an issue is when a child doesn't know how to handle their own boredom. You know, they get bored and then they go and misbehave because they're trying to look for things that are interesting to them. That's a different question altogether. That's not what you're asking here. You didn't say that, at least. You know, but let's say that is the question. Then the answer is, well, so clearly your child isn't always bored because there are things they're interested in. They're just things that you don't want them to be interested in. They're going and making trouble because they find those things interesting. Well, that's actually probably a good sign. It shows that they do have a capacity of being interested in stuff. You know, some people have no ability to be interested in anything. This kid, at least he has something that interests him. Okay, so it's something you don't want him to be doing, but at least it means he has interests. And once somebody interests you, work with them and you try to, you know, work from that point to something that's an appropriate way of spending time. Look at what they're doing that's inappropriate and use that behavior as an indication to you of the direction to go into of something that is interesting to them. Just find an appropriate alternative. Here's a question about my child is just never happy. Always look next thing to buy. He has everything. Why does he have everything? How old is this child who has everything? Or always rushing on to the next thing that isn't more exciting? What type of help should he get? I don't know. How old is this child? This doesn't sound like a little child. He's 11. How does an 11-year-old child have everything? Unless you bought him everything. Why do you give him everything? He has all the Lego sets. Okay. Well, that's good. Legos is good. But he wants different Lego sets, cameras, keyboards. Okay, I guess that's not really working for him. Oh, he has anxiety. I'm just responding to the private chat here. The child says that he wants another Lego set or another camera or another keyboard. That's not what the child wants, clearly, because you keep giving him those things and it's not working. So that's not what he wants. Can I ask you a question? You respond to me in chat. When you got the child, your son, your 11-year-old son, when you bought your 11-year-old son the Lego set, how much time did you spend building Legos with him? He saves up and buys them. Okay, you know what? He's an 11-year-old child. He saves up. Saves up what? Money that you gave him or money that you gave him access to go earn? I mean, ultimately, this is a child, so it's not like, not like he has a job, a real job. You know, if he has money, it's because you're giving it to him or allowing him to get it. Point is, he bought his last Lego set. Okay, you're saying he bought it. Fine, he bought it. How much time did you spend playing the Lego with your son? Like, how much time would you estimate that you spent playing Legos with him? You're saying a lot of time. How much time? Husband spends hours with him. That's great. That's fantastic. It's fantastic. All Shabbos afternoon, Baruch Hashem, Kinen Hara. Sounds great. I think a lot of people will be jealous of you. I mean, first of all, your husband's a tzaddik. He spends all Shabbos afternoon playing Legos with your son. That's beautiful. So then, let me try it a little bit differently for you. He's always looking for the next thing to buy. Okay, he's always rushing for the next thing that's more exciting. That was the question. He's just not happy. Always nudging for the next thing. Some people are unsettled. Some people are looking for something. What your husband is doing right now is exactly what you should be doing. You're by spending hours on Shabbos afternoon, all Shabbos afternoon, Legos with the kid, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. Ultimately, he knows that his relationship with you guys is stable. He knows that he can count on it. Is he challenged with the fact that he's fickle? Okay, yeah. What's causing it? I don't know. I don't know what's causing it. Is it a disorder? Is it normal? I don't know. But here's the thing. He's a kid. I don't know if he'll be able to figure it out. But when he is ready to figure it out, or when he is ready to work on it or change it, the fact that your husband invested all those Shabbos afternoons making Lego is going to make it possible for him to work on whatever he needs to work on. A person who has a solid relationship with his parents, that support, feels that stability, that's a person that when he's ready to work on whatever he has to work on, he'll be much more motivated and more successful. So, for now, just keep doing it. Keep spending that time. Keep deepening that bond. I understand it's frustrating. You want him to be settled. He's not settled. Why is he not settled? We don't know. And it's very hard to get a child to tell you. Usually children don't even know it's settled. Or even if even if they know, they can't express it or they don't want to express it. So what are you supposed to do, But by investing in that time, that's fantastic. Keep that up. And don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged. Don't assume that, it's not working. He's still unsettled and running from one thing to the next thing. What you're doing is tremendous, and it's the best investment possible in his future success. Don't stop it. Don't be discouraged about it. I promise you, every hour that your husband, the tzaddik, spent playing Lego with that kid is the best investment you could ever have in this child's future happiness, success. It is the best investment, more than anything you could do for him. Now, there may be other things that you need to do for him in the future, but playing Legos with him all afternoon, I got to tell you something, that is so good and so smart and so productive, and just keep it up and don't be discouraged. Should we feed his needs when he nudges, when he asks to look online for toys, etc.? Nicht, like we say in Yiddish. Whatever you want. Look, I don't think he's unsettled because he doesn't have enough toys. And I don't think he's unsettled because he has too many toys. It's clearly something in his personality. If he wants to get new toys, let him get new toys. I don't think that's what's going to make it or break it. But having that connection with him, and that whatever new toy he gets, he knows that he's going to play it with his parents, that is gold. That is gold. And you want to continue. He's 11, right? Okay. So he's at a pivotal point. He's entering the preteens and then the teenage years. You want to hold on to this. You've got something gold right now. Right now, he buys a toy and he plays with the toy with his father. We want to make sure that when he's 14, 15, 16, 17, and he's buying different toys, the toys that, they say little boys, little toys, big boys, big toys, that the toys he's into when he's older, he still wants to play those games with his father. That's the thing. You say, "Are we happy he has friends?" That's fine. The friends are okay. I'm not worried about the friends. The relationship with you guys, that's everything. That's everything. Especially if he has temperament where he's unsettled and he's always looking for the next thrill, okay, then I want to make sure that whatever it is that he's into, he's doing it with you. And yeah, so because of that, he gets older and he wants the big toys and, he starts buying cars or whatever, real cars or whatever it is that he buys. Make sure that his father's still his best friend, the guy that goes with him, to buy the car and, drive around and take the trip and whatever it is. Just keep that up. Don't stop that. Okay. Bunch of other questions. It's kind of late here. So what I'll do is, as soon as we finish the chat, the questions disappear. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to cut and paste here. Here's a parenting question. Okay, I'm going to cut and paste it here. I'm going to go save it somewhere else. Did it work? Yeah.
Rabbi,
Okay. Saved it. And we'll deal with it, God willing, next week, if we can, possibly.
Right, we'll leave the chat on for you so you can take any questions you want off it for next week. Thank you so much again for an amazing, insightful, clear talk and direction for us. Very much appreciated. God bless you. I want to again thank the Herschel Wives for their sponsorship of this program, and also to mention that it's the Ili Nishmas, Adrian Siffer, Avon Jacob and Pinchas Zelig. Next week, same place, same time. It's parent-child relationships, all the things your child was scared to tell you. And we are collating some of those questions from some of the children in the community. We'll try and get them to Rabbi. Some of these comments for Rabbi Taub to talk about next week. God bless you all. Good night. Safe trip home.